Namaste everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is kushalmehra. Today we are going to talk about the reforms announcement that the Prime Minister made on his address to the nation on the 15th of August from Lal Killa. Um, our focus is only going to be the economic aspect of it, not on the military and other bits and foreign policy related. So basically, what has happened is Donald Trump and his announcement of tariffs on India has kind of suddenly woken up the entire Indian establishment from its slumber, and suddenly they realize, oh, हम तो reform भी कर सकते थे, and it's since then that a lot of things have been happening. There's a lot of news about the GST rationalization, and that's going to be the primary focus in the beginning. I'm not saying that's the only thing. We're going to talk about economic reforms overall that we feel the country needs to be taking up. And obviously there was a high powered committee that the Prime Minister had chaired recently. We had seen visuals of that also. So Harsh, kya haal hai bhai?
All good, Kushal. Good to be on your pod again.
तो भाई चलो, एक पॉजिटिव चीज है जो मैंने और तूने पिछली बार डिस्कस किए थे, प्रधानमंत्री ने अपने स्पीच में उसके कुछ अंश तो बोले. सो वी वुड फर्स्ट लाइक टू स्टार्ट दिस पॉडकास्ट बाय थैंकिंग द ऑनरेबल प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफ इंडिया. उन्होंने कुछ तो चीजें, हम नहीं बोल रहे हमारी वजह से हुई हैं, मगर हमें खुशी है कि हमने वो बात की और सडनली वो वहां पहुंच गई. ये कोइंसिडेंस तो हम वो तुक्का वापस ट्राई कर रहे हैं.
हाँ ठीक है, why not?
वही तुक्का. सो व्हाट डू यू मेक ऑफ दिस? सो CNBC sorry had shown this slide. So they had said ये proposed GST changes hai. This is related to travel and hospitality. This was for automobiles. Yeah, I just don't understand India and our fetish for 40% rate. मतलब ये ये मतलब 28% वाला क्या ऑब्सेशन है, मुझे नहीं मालूम. हमको क्यों ये पॉलिटिशियंस कब सुधरेंगे? फुटवेयर में भी अबव 1000 में क्यों 12% है? लाइक आई जस्ट डोंट अंडरस्टैंड दिस रैशनल इन इंडिया. कोई मेरे को समझा दे. बट दिस इज व्हाट CNBC हैज शोन टिल नाउ. And mobile, laptop, computer, Wi-Fi, all these things are also covered. So first of all, you tell me, what do you make of whatever we have heard so far from the economic reform, and what did you make of the Prime Minister's speech there?
Kushal, once again, great to be on your pod. I think what the Prime Minister spoke on 15th August, personally, I feel, perhaps along with his very first speech, but I think it's probably even better than that, was his best speech so far. It was not because it was his longest speech, although it was also the longest speech that he made. He came across, first of all, very energetic. He came across as very charged, and he came across as somebody who understood the gravity of the moment. Um, the reality is that the way Donald Trump has been relatively soft on China, for whatever reasons we can speculate, is ushering in a de facto G2 in the world. And, when the last G2 happened, USA and USSR in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I remember then USSR was not our land border, was not sharing a land border with us, was not, therefore, did not have any tensions with us. And it was easier to, so to say, play US and USSR against each other. Now, of course, I know we're not discussing too much foreign policy today, but because China being the other part of the G2 today, and we have a complicated relationship with China, it makes it a bit trickier to play the two superpowers against each other. And given our sense of self, which I think is also a very important aspect, psychologically, civilizationally, we therefore have no other option but to reform, but to invest more in defense, invest more in tech autonomy once again not being autarky, and do whatever has to be done, even if they are, painful in the short term. To that extent, the overall sense what was required, I think, came through. I think one key aspect which I had mentioned on social media also, and as we discussed earlier also on your last podcast, was along with the whole tech autonomy, whether it be in the civilian side or the defense side, the government needed to up the macro stimulus. The government, of course, directly does not control monetary policy. That's more the domain of RBI. But fiscal policy was and remains the Ministry of Finance, Government of India's domain. There, this GST cuts, where the details, to be fair, are still not fully out in the public domain. it will go through the GST Council through its own procedure. We have estimates of couple of scenarios. I think SBI had a report. They had a couple of scenarios. They took the average of them and they said it's around a $10 billion of fiscal slippage. Basically, it's a $10 billion stimulus, if you want to call it that. Basically, the rates are going down. When most the 12% rate is, so just for viewers, 5%, 12%, 18%, 28% were the four slabs that we had in GST. We had some cesses and we had some exceptions for diamonds and gold and jewelry, which were at 0.5%, 1.5%, or 3%. But the main slabs are 5, 12, 18, 28. What the government has now proposed is they will just get rid of the 12% slab. Most of the 12% items will come to 5, and many, a very large number, 28, will come down to 18, and some will go to a new demerit slash sin slash luxury slab of 40%, which you had initially hinted at in the beginning in your opening remarks. So 40% may sound excessive, but let's see whether the cess applies there or not, because the CNBC graph you had shown, for example, for large SUVs, including the cess and all that, it came to between 43 and 50%. So if the cess does not apply or applies to a lesser extent, it may not be at least a tax increase. It will be a tax increase on some tobacco, etc. products. So long story short, the government has decided to cut consumption taxes, simplify GST a bit by removing one slab. Is it a theoretically perfect GST that will make everybody happy? No. The devil will be in the details. One risk is that if we go to the lowest bracket, which is 5%, and in some categories the government takes away ITC, input tax credit, that could actually counterintuitively turn out to be more expensive than being in 12 or 18%, but with ITC. To be fair, industry bodies themselves have asked both kind of things, so they've also spoken out, through both sides of their mouth, so to speak. But I think we should give government the credit for A, reducing one slab, B, trying to simplify. We'll get to know the details. I think much more can be done. I think the government has hinted at saying that they will coordinate the inspector Raj, so to speak, within GST, between the state bureaucracy and the union bureaucracy. Because right now, what happens, both the state GST officers and union GST officers can come to a business establishment and do their own independent checks, which, as we all know, on the ground turns out to be especially a means of extortion, especially at the state level. So I think there are administrative reforms, there is a tax rationalization reform, and there is a tax cut, which is a fiscal stimulus. So it has served multiple purposes. The economy needed a fiscal stimulus, macro easing, it serves that purpose. It serves a long lasting demand of removing one slab at least, administrative ease on the margin. And then there is another nuanced angle, is that you see, when the GST was put in place, I think in 2017, one of the genius ideas that the PM and then FM Arun Jaitley ji had was to give a 5-year compensation guarantee, or put in certain nominal CAGR for their state consumption taxes, which were replaced by GST. I think compounding at 10-11%, or the exact number was, which turned out to be, in retrospect, aggressive, because the economy went through a slowdown, etc. That was supposed to expire in 2022, but given COVID and all that, it was further extended by 2, effectively 3 years. So now there is a difficult discussion that will happen, because so far the states, after the introduction of GST, had a floor on their revenue, so to speak. That if their share was not rising at a particular percentage, the difference was to be compensated by the union government. That 5-year window got extended because of COVID. It had to anyway lapse at some point. And then there are certain issues in GST which can come up, because now if their rate of growth is not as high as some states want, especially opposition states, which obviously have a political incentive also to make a big deal about it, and understandably in a democracy, then the question will rise, have we overly centralized? I think that is an issue that will come out in the next few months, quarters, 1 or 2 years. But just to summarize and then hand it back to you for the moment, this was a fiscal stimulus that is required. This was, on the margin, a very good rationalization. One slab is going away. There is talk of administrative easiness. I think you mentioned about a high-level committee separately, which we'll talk about, which the government just convened yesterday, just formed yesterday, which has been given a 12-month mandate. I wish these committees would get like 6-month mandates. Like 12 months is a too long a time to.
देखो समझ नहीं आता कितने समोसे और पकौड़े खाने हैं जो 12 महीने इनको लगते हैं यार। मैं तो सीधी बात करता हूँ यार, ये मतलब और तो कुछ होता नहीं है, समोसे और पकौड़े खाते होंगे उधर बैठ के।
To be fair, I mean, there is a lot of detail to go through, but given the criticality of the mission, 6 months would have been decent enough, long enough, but without.
Orange man is on our head and our government needs a year to do this stuff यार। Let's be real यार।
Yeah, to get a committee report, I think a year is long. Maybe 6 months would have been optimal while being long enough. So, long story short, without ignoring the foreign policy and tech parts today, just focusing on the GST, the ease of doing business, ease of living, the non-financial regulatory reform committee, as it has been called. I shared the PDF with you before we started the show. It looks like the government is very serious. The government wants to, and the government has constantly been decriminalizing a lot of small offenses. They'll continue doing that. The government had labor law codes which were introduced a few years ago. They've not been implemented at the union level per se, but a lot of the states, including opposition states, I had shared this earlier, around 20 states have implemented very large aspects of those labor law reforms. For example, you can have, instead of 100 people, 300 people before you need to go to any labor inspector to get any kind of permission to fire. You can work overnight, women can work overnight, and so on and so forth. Multiple liberalizations, reforms. So the extension of the ceiling above which these things apply has all been extended by various states, including opposition states. Just not because of they want to do anything for the prime minister or against the prime minister, simply because competition between states to attract investments has genuinely taken off. So that's a very good part of Indian federalism. It's cooperative as well as competitive. Tamil Nadu, for example, is not at all a BJP ruled state, but you have to give it to them. They have been very good at attracting investments and having an ecosystem there. Whatever the upsides and downsides may be in that particular state or in other states. So all in all, it seems the government, both during the prime minister's speech, the various steps that have been taken since then, seems to have been shaken out of its slumber. I think last 1 year, it is fair to say, on the economic reform side or on economic policy in general, the government was a bit cautious or conservative. Maybe it was a function of the first time this government not being a simple majority government, being a coalition government. But definitely the Trump tantrums have shaken the government. Foreign policy, as you know very well, a lot of stuff is happening, but even economically, domestically, and that's a good sign. My only concern is that some of these detailed reports, by the time they come out, the moment may have passed. So I hope that at least informally a lot of stuff is done. Even meanwhile, these more detailed committee reports are produced, and I'm sure the government wants to do that. But कई बार क्या होता है ना कि एक रिपोर्ट आपने बनाने कमिटी बिठा दी तो फिर you mentally tick it off and then you wait and then the moment passes. So I think that is the only thing I'm worried about. But otherwise, full marks to them on GST rationalization. It was never going to be a one rate in India. Let us be realistic. We cannot be like Singapore. You cannot have a Mercedes and a packet of Moody in a supermarket selling at the same GST rate. Why? Let's just quickly see that also. The reason is very simple. In India, very few people pay direct taxes. The number of people who file and forget file, a lot of people file zero taxes as well. The number of people who actually pay direct income taxes, personal income taxes, like 2% or 2.5%. And the people who file maybe 4%. But remember, usme bhi bahut sare people are basically government employees. So the number of people who actually file, because again, what is India's per capita income? India's per capita income is right to around 2.5 lakhs. And now you're effectively tax free till 8 or 9 lakhs. What is the per capita income in America? $90,000. And where does your direct tax start? $25,000, $30,000. Udhar ulta hai. So the number of people who pay direct taxes, or especially social security charges, etc., is 50, 60, 70% there, 50% there at least. Here it's 2-3%. In America does not need a VAT or a sales tax in the extent India does. Although America may import tariffs are actually nothing but essentially combination of sales tax plus a PLI. Like what is tariff? Tariff is a consumption tax, except only on foreign imports. It's not on domestically produced stuff. It's the same thing as having a sales tax and domestic manufacturers को कुछ रुपए वापस देना. So it is conceptually similar to a sales tax plus PLI. So America is also now needing that extra revenue. I mean, whatever the merits or demerits of Trump's tariffs may be from an American point of view, but India has to be much more quote unquote progressive in its indirect taxes, in its GST. Progressive in the sense that more luxury items, more expensive items have to be charged at a higher rate, whereas items which are more for everyday usage have to be charged at a lower rate. If India had a much bigger direct tax net, then we could have had something close to a one rate GST. So that is the context of why India cannot go to a one rate GST. But I'm very happy you have gone from 4 to 3 for now.
Yeah, but are these reforms sufficient? Because what I understand is that the real reform is at the end of the auditing, the filing of the returns, and all that stuff.
So
When will that simplification happen?
I'll read out to you the terms of reference of the HLC, which was formed yesterday, the High Level Committee on Non-Financial Regulatory Reforms. So I'm just reading out the terms of references, the TOR only, to improve ease of doing business, ease of living, to reduce overall compliance burden for citizens and enterprises, to evaluate all current laws, rules, regulations, certifications, processes relating to economic activities, suggest ways to simplify, consolidate, combine them, where relevant, eliminate them, to examine avenues for self-certification or third-party inspections which are not by the government effectively. In particular, but not limited to, the HLC may focus on MSMEs and the requirements for registration, pre-establishment approvals, post-establishment operations such as inspection and compliances. Then there is on foreign trade, exports and imports. Where can they get reduced requirements of certification, for example, from BIS, FSSAI, etc.? Where can the compliance requirements under Companies Act 2013 be reduced under Pollution Act 1974? And registration of entities, basically multiple registration. GST के साथ अलग होता है, direct tax के साथ अलग होता है. अभी हम as individual taxpayers हमारा PAN number है, TAN number है. I mean, I can share with you, like, just a simple thing like paying TDS on rent is such an administrative nightmare. And the point is, the government, I understand why the government has an impulse. We also sometimes caricature babus, and it's not fair to be. If we were in their shoes, I'm not sure we would do something dramatically different. But the point is,
I disagree with you. I think they deserve the caricature because their assumption is everybody is a chore. The government of India functions under the assumption that हम सब चोर हैं.
I'm okay with you caricaturing them. किसी को तो attack करना चाहिए. I'm fine with that. My point is simply that, exactly, because we start with the assumption that everybody is a chore, instead of going after those 5% who are chore and who are definitely should go after, आप 95% की पूरी जिंदगी खराब कर देते. मतलब कौन से देश में इंसान एक लैंडलॉर्ड को रेंट दे रहा है, उस पर भी मेरे टीडीएस देना मेरी जिम्मेदारी है? अरे भाई, मैं वाइट में दे रहा हूँ, मैं प्रॉपर्ली डिजिटली दे रहा हूँ, आप उनसे ले लो, कोई सवाल हो पूछो, पैन नंबर मेरा भी, उनका पैन नंबर भी, आप वो सब ले लो. But why should I be responsible for his or her tax paying? It's not like I have any problems paying TDS. It's just that the hassle, and then ये form हो गया, वो form हो गया, and similarly small things, TCS, ESS. आप घर खरीदने जाओ, आपको local body को ये देना है, ये देना है. I understand why the government does it. The government wants to have multiple points of collecting tax because they feel if there is one or two big points, then it's उस पे अगर आपने चोरी कर ली तो आप basically कुछ tax दे ही नहीं रहे. So I understand the mindset behind it, but उसमें भी it becomes much easier. For example, TDS on salaries now for white collar people, that I understand is now a well settled system. You work in a corporation, you get money after TDS is cut. It is running smoothly. So I'm not saying get rid of all TDSs, but on small things where you have been declared liable, where technically the guy you're paying to, he has to pay. GST में भी तो यही problems हो रही हैं. See, again, I'm saying it's not easy because in the initial periods of GST, when compliance was not properly done, there were so many people who tried to cheat the government and get refund through फर्जी transactions. So हम इतना AI बात करते हैं. So actually, if we can use AI and big data and all of these machine learning, etc., on this, See, I'll give you an example. US may, for example, when you use your credit card or debit card in US and Canada, where you are right now, the OTP system is not very common, right? You use your credit, you use your card, it's done. In India, because we assume that, and I mean, personally, I like the OTP system, so I have no problem with it. In India, you want to use the card, there's an OTP. But because US में OTP system नहीं है, the card companies are forced to develop big data analysis techniques that Kushal generally spends in this zip code. A sizable transaction has been made in that zip code. Let us go and quickly double check, if required, call Kushal and just. So you go after the exception and try to make sure that honest people don't suffer. What our mindset is कि आप सब पे लगा दो compliance. And where I will agree with you is a lot of babus have not spent any time in the private sector, right? If the average babu's life is extremely cloistered and comfortable at the senior level, in the sense, and I've been actually talking about increasing their cash component, so I'm not at all in any way demonizing them. But so many of the everyday hassles that a common citizen, a common businessman goes through, the average elite babu in India does not have to go through that. अगर उनका कुछ compliance भी होता है, वो फोन करते हैं अपने fellow IAS को, कॉल कर दिया, वो काम हो गया. Because they can get it done at their level, other people have to suffer or basically effectively pay a bribe and get it done. So that kind of stuff, I mean, closing a corporation, closing a business, a small limited liability company, it's so painful to close it. And just we can make it better by हर चीज में ना, like अगर आपका टर्नओवर इतना है तो आप इस टर्नओवर के नीचे और रिक्वायरमेंट रेगुलेशंस कम कर दो. And to be fair, again, the government is doing it. For example, every year they are increasing आपके जो direct tax के जो cases चल रहे थे डिपार्टमेंट के साथ, every year the government is increasing the size. क्यों? अगर 10 लाख के नीचे है, 20 लाख के नीचे है और 5 साल के ऊपर है, तो just consider it settled, and the government will at least not further appeal. If the government loses in a court, they will not appeal in the higher court. So they are doing this commonsensically. And cumulatively it will all add up to something better. Again, last point here is direct tax may the so-called anonymous assessment. There are people who want to try to game it, they try to do that there also. But it has been a huge simplification for the average person. There is some query, it goes to some particular tax officer, depending on the case, and everything is there's a digital trail everywhere and it gets solved. So systems are they're being put there. All of our, all the taxes that have been deducted on your behalf, you can see in your form 26, etc. So all that stuff is happening. The big data integration in the database behind all of this is happening, which today comes as an automatic input to your tax filing, and it is dramatically easier compared to 5 or 10 years ago. But what is also true is that everyday living is also much more dramatically complicated, in the sense that there are so many digital payments. So many more people today trade in the stock markets. उनकी capital gains है, उनका कोई derivative का transaction है, उसका एक अलग taxation है. So the complication of the average middle class, upper middle class family is also increased, and the government is trying to keep up. But on this, my only humble request, and I hope the HLC does that, is please try to use big data, AI, whatever fancy word you want to call it. Try to go after the 5% who are cheating, especially in any substantial amount. And for 95% of the people, just let it be. For 95% of the people, we need not assume the worst. There could be honest mistakes also. There could be some legacy issues. And one final point, which is not directly in the remit of this HLC, and I think Supreme Court is also, real estate they'll have to work with state governments and local governments also. So it's not easy. Again, easier said than done. India is a country where stamp duties are very high and property taxes are relatively low. So what happens is the incentive to not fully properly pay is high because the taxes are so high. And then what happens is when you want to sell it, liquidity goes down. In most Western countries, for example, your annual property tax is slightly higher. अब इंडिया में क्या होता है कि property tax goes to the municipal corporation, but the stamp duty goes to the state government. So the state government has no incentive to reduce that. And if we don't do those things, जहाँ पे असली होता है, असली करप्शन होता है, the black economy does not get fully finished. Because to the best of my understanding, most people in the younger generations would really not want this hassle. There are, maybe some legacy issues, because remember during Indira Gandhi's time, at one point we had 97% tax. And obviously, anybody who was in a small business would be, in the 1970s, would be an idiot to pay 97% tax, right? I think it's fair to say. I mean, I generally want to fully encourage full compliance with all laws, but then the laws also have to be somewhat sensible. And today also, I feel direct tax uh, reforms की कमेटी थी, उसकी रिपोर्ट पब्लिक नहीं की गई. See, having top rates of 40%, including all the cesses, whether we like it or not, will lead to some parallel economy. आप उसको टॉप रेट को 30% कर दो. Let talent come back, let diaspora come back, attract, since we're talking about tech autonomy stuff. और जो बंदा अपने पहले वाले को वाइट करना चाहता है, उसको 35%, उसको एक हायर रेट पे कर दो. लेकिन अगर आपका टॉप रेट 40% है, आप पहले वाले को ब्लैक टू व्हाइट तो 45 पे करवाओगे, फिर 45 पे लोग करते नहीं. Because you see, there's something called a Laffer curve effect in taxation. There's a strong Laffer curve effect, there's a weak or moderate Laffer curve. I think the moment is high that digital India ko, let's take it to the logical conclusion. Financial inclusion, take it to the logical conclusion. A lot of people want assets which are in the financial assets, some real assets. Make it completely transparent, everything put on a digital ledger. And for that, sticks like demonetization, one can continue to agree or disagree. I have a view that fine, as a part of a larger boutique of reforms, it was useful as a stick. But उसके साथ आपको carrots भी चाहिए. तो गवर्नमेंट ने बीच में कुछ डायरेक्ट टैक्सेस पीक में कम किए थे, बीच में बहुत ज्यादा 42 43 तक चला गया था. Now the peak rate, including all the cesses, is 39%. I mean, personally, I have no problem with that. Anyway, if I speak, people say like, "Oh, you're just talking your own selfish book," so on and so forth. But the reality is, if you want to attract diaspora talent, if you want to reduce a parallel economy, 39-40% is still very, very high. We do not have social services like Denmark or Scandinavia, etc. And again, it's unrealistic. We can't have it because very few people are paying taxes. 3% लोगों के taxes पे आप सबको सब कुछ नहीं दे सकते. But if you reduce from not 40 to 20, but even 30, I genuinely believe compliance will kick in, and that will give you more buoyancy in revenue. So that is where I agree with you that sometimes babus or top bureaucrats are too mechanical in their thinking. Somebody who has been in the private sector, who has seen everyday life as a common man, they will understand an average insan ka incentive kya hai. Not everything can be mechanized in a formula, right? So sometimes an impact is much higher for something which on paper looks small. So basically, cut direct taxes, cut indirect taxes as they are doing, do substantial work through this HLC committee or even before it. And one final point is, do not worry too much about the fiscal deficit. Because आपने जो 4 साल consolidate किया, the glide path, fiscal consolidation path from FY 21-22 to now FY 25, and FY 26 was supposed to be the last year, and from FY 27 we were supposed to go to debt to GDP. Which was extremely, extremely impressive. I personally think it was even then a bit too much. But for a political party, last year was a general election. To be so fiscally conservative before a general election is generally considered something praiseworthy, because most politicians, you have to stop them from spending too much, right? So they were restrained, but you had actually saved up for an emergency like this, right? I'm not saying we should panic or some huge crisis, but the fact that Donald Trump has basically thrown the Indo-US relationship under the bus for now. For all we know, in 2 weeks the headlines will be different. If there is a Russia-Ukraine peace deal, the whole concept of a secondary tariff or sanction does not make any sense. That does not mean the relationship will become warm immediately again, because even the base 25% tariff is much higher than we thought, and there is no trade deal done yet. Nonetheless, the heated rhetoric from both sides will reduce a bit, like what Besant is saying, what Peter Navarro wrote in FT, etc. Right now is probably the peak of this heated tariff. Let's hope it doesn't get worse from both sides, but especially from America's side. So things may change, but this moment is calling us to say that it will come back again. And this time, if we want to be a true pole, we will need a bigger budget for defense. We will have to do more indigenization. And for all of that, one variable will have to be let go. And let that be fiscal deficit. Because at least at the union government level, आप इतना welfareism नहीं कर रहे हो. I agree. All the Ladli Behan Yojnas, etc., people like to talk about. Most of them are at state government levels, including by BJP state governments, no doubt about it. But at the union government level, I would say the capex intensity of union government expenditure over time has increased compared to OPEX. So this government is creating hard assets for the future of the economy. Given you're doing that, given the severity of the situation, given the importance of defense indigenization and more spend, given the importance of tech autonomy, let fiscal deficit be one variable which you let go of. Monetary policy has enough space to cover up. And anyway, globally, the macro is such, without going into details right now, that we will be doing okay. S&P has just revised us upwards. You're already investment rating. They've taken it slightly higher. But उन्होंने रिवाइज कर दिया, आपने अभी जीएसटी अनाउंस कर दिया, and your 10Y has gone from 6.3, 6.4 to 6.5. So rating agencies के impress करने के चक्कर में ज्यादा फायदा नहीं है. They are at best lagging indicators. So long as your investment grade slightly higher or slightly lower, honestly does not make much difference. Would I take slightly higher? Of course, yes. But compared to that delta, the importance of spending on India's defense, infrastructure, tech autonomy, growth is much, much, much higher right now. So GST is not just a reform, it is also a fiscal stimulus. And much more of that has to be done. And since the government is going back to first principles right now, let them also do it on direct taxes. Although, I mean, in the short term, we should not realistically have expectations, given government has already been doing a lot on direct taxes, and the bean counting, fiscal bean counting goes in a particular way in the government. So I'm not holding hopes high there, but from a first principles point of view, honestly, 39% is still very high. We should be throwing packets. The amount of hatred against successful Indian immigrants, at least in 10% of the online American sphere. I'm not saying it is representative of broader North American society. I'm very aware of that. Nonetheless, if they want to cut or reduce H1B visas, nobody will be happier than me today. Just from a patriotic point of view, I'm not saying the people who wanted that H1B visa, I'm laughing at them. Not at all. I myself have earlier worked in the US, so I have full empathy for those professionals. But from an Indian national interest point of view, given the stage of development we are, there's already a strong diaspora, there's a critical mass within India now. If we can get the talent back, अमेरिका बेवकूफ़ी कर रही है H1B वीजा में, अगर करती है, लेट्स होप सो, वो उनका पुश है. हमारा पुल क्या है? हमारा पुल can be lower tax rates and better ease of living. The better ease of living, one large part is urban governance reforms. Now that is another discussion topic altogether. Perception of safety, better policing, maybe more female police officers. Every now and then people keep on talking about tourism. But see, whatever works for residents also works for tourists. I think somebody on Twitter, I mean, in general, it's a thing well known, well understood. If a place is good for residents, it's generally good for tourists also. ऐसा तो नहीं ना कि उधर रहने वालों को मुश्किल हो रहा है तो टूरिस्ट आके बहुत तारीफ कर देंगे.
See, the only reason the tourism bit had come across is I think Amitabh Kantji had mentioned, and then Anand also mentioned the problems that how we are, and I think Anand was right in all his points.
No, I agree. So I quoted Anand and said that I largely agree. No, even before Amitabh Kant, this tourism thing has come up many times, and it is true. Tourism is one of the few low-hanging fruits. And it is also true that we are relatively still low per capita income. It's also true as a democracy, we can't do what China did and just remove people from the cities, jao gao chale jao, we will not show slum. And we should not do that also. We don't have the hukou system, what China tried to do in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. अचानक आसपास सारे के सारे फैक्ट्री बंद कर दिए, सब गरीब लोगों को भेज दिया, तो साफ भी दिख रहा है, पोल्यूशन भी नहीं दिख रहा है, because they wanted to project a certain image. And we are proud as a democracy, so we don't want that authoritarian impact. But a lot of stuff can be done. I mean, why do you think so many people now increasingly want to live in these private gated communities in our cities? Because it's not like Indians can't keep their immediate surroundings clean. It's just that in a private incentive system it works. A municipal setup में एक बंदे की unionized job है. There are local politics involved in that. That person may or may not himself come to clean it. he may get X amount of salary. He may at half of the salary outsource it in a contract sense. और जिसको आउटसोर्स करेगा वो रोज आने के बदले 2-3 दिन में एक बार आ जाएगा. सो इट इतना इतना साफ रह इतना गंदा रहता है कि कोई कंप्लेन ना करे, बट पूरा साफ भी नहीं रहता. Small things like that. Again, a lot of good things have happened this time. Crazy rains are happening in Mumbai in the last few days, and the water has not been filled to the extent some people were expecting, despite the amount of rain that happened. So urban governance and ease of living, along with lower tax rates, along with pushing away from the West, could really bring not just the diaspora but even a lot of expats to India, along with broader policies. And unko, see, who are you competing with? See, whether we like it or not, there is Dubai, there is Singapore. Dubai mein there is zero tax. Yes, American citizen PR holders have to pay because they have a global taxation system. So they don't have to pay to Dubai, but they have to pay to US if you are a citizen or a PR holder. Everybody else, because most countries have a territorial taxation system, not a global taxation system. Dubai is great. Then there is Singapore. चलो हांगकांग आप बोल सकते हो चाइनीज ऑर्बिट में चला गया पूरा. लंदन वापस नॉन डॉम टैक्स चला गया. बट हाउ डू यू compete with talent who is very happy to play the larger India story while still living in Dubai and Singapore? Now, you cannot go to zero taxation rates. I'm not saying that's realistic. And Singapore, by the way, is also not zero. Singapore is at a low rate. Dubai is zero. But you'll have to be cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of talent who either does not care about taxes and just would, even if they want to be in the US at a high tax rate, they're okay with it. Maybe given their industry or something about their personal life. Then there is India. And then there are two low tax or zero tax big cities or nation states around us. Small nation states, but big cities like Dubai and UAE broadly and Singapore. How do you compete with them? Your cities have to be a bit more livable and your taxes have to be slightly lower. Realistically, they cannot be much lower, but they can be slightly lower. And that delta, that incremental delta, can allow just 1 million more professionals, diaspora and expats, over the next 10 years. If they're paying even $30,000-$40,000 a year in income tax in India, you do the math, it more than pays for itself, along with incubating a broader ecosystem here across various sectors. So we have हमारा एक zero sum mindset सिर्फ इंडिया के अंदर नहीं होना चाहिए. We should actually try to get talent, including the diaspora, from outside. That will be the real proof of the pudding for ease of living and ease of doing business. And that is where we actually have, see, ultimately, once you have the basics, India remains a relatively low-cost place to live compared to most countries in the world, developed world at least. So there are natural advantages in India. But if despite the low cost, if for a lot of people it is either considered unlivable, fairly, unfairly, or somewhere in the middle, or if they are getting a proper white-collar job, they have to pay for almost 40% direct taxes as a TDS cut on day one. A lot of people will say, never mind. So I think these are things which can turbocharge our growth. And my only kind of hope is that we don't have a zero-sum mindset intra-India and try to see, because India is still 3.5 to 4% of global GDP, 3.5 to 4% of global market cap. Of course, 17% of global population and 8-9% of global GDP in PPP terms. But there is a long, long way to go. We are very influential, no doubt. But where we can be, uske mukable, there is still a long way to go. So these things, basically taxes, ease of living, and compliance, they have to be cut across the board, and they have to be cut across the board with the understanding and the expectation कि आप ऐसा mathematical calculation मत करो कि आपने काट दिया तो आपका revenue चला जाएगा. Please try to understand, when you अगर आप cut करोगे, then a lot more people will come and work in India. I am not saying believe in magical strong Laffer curve effects. You can cut rates by 10% and you will still get more revenue. If you cut rates by 10 percentage points, you may only lose revenue by 2 percentage points. You'll probably still lose, but you will not lose 1-to-1. And that by itself is not a small thing when you anyway require a fiscal stimulus right now. So I think it's a very nuanced point, and the very great members have been there in the HLC. Manish Sabarwal from Team Lease, Janmay Sinha from BCG, Niti Aayog, so obviously Rajiv Gauba, Mr. Pawan Goenka from the National Space Promotion Authorization Center, and of course, all the industry bodies, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, etc., etc. So, and CII. So they have all the great bodies, all the right people, all the right terms of references. Maybe 12 months is a bit too much, but fine. And this time they really, I hope the committee report is a bit faster and it is made public and they really implement it. एटलीस्ट देखिए आप जो कंपनी बना रहे हो वो उसका उसकी जो फॉर्म्स हैं नॉट ऑल ऑफ देम आर स्टेट गवर्नमेंट रिलेटेड. तो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट नहीं भी कोऑपरेट करती तो यूनियन गवर्नमेंट पे जो आप इजी करते हो उसको इजी कर दो. Opening an LLP or closing a limited liability company, it need not be that difficult. If there are some dues, just assume an NOC. After 14 days, get it done. If somebody has to pay something, get it the paid done and get it done. So I think a lot more can be done. And this se hota kya hai ki ultimately, and it's a great community, so they have my full respect. But benefit happens for CAs and to some extent lawyers. ये इतना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड जो है ना कंप्लायंस और टैक्सेशन, इसका सिर्फ और सिर्फ बेनिफिट सीएस को जाता है एंड टू सम एक्सटेंट लॉयर्स. सो दिस इज I mean, India is a growing economy. Our CAs will do much more actual CA related work, no, not just tax filing arbitrage here and there. So that is my only suggestion. But honestly, Kushal, we also have to be realistic in our expectations in the next few months.
No, I understand. Like this news was there that FM is already supposed to address the GOM on insurance. This has been a sticky point for a while. There are two shades in this, like on medical insurance. What should be the GST? That was one. But I wanted to focus.
with and without ITC वो भी इशू था.
Yeah,
एंड
वो
लोग
एक
कब से रो
issue है.
रहे थे कि यार सीमेंट को आप 28 से 18 लाओ. आई थिंक फाइनली आ रहा है, which is very very important. And at least for the cheaper cars and cheaper hotel rooms, I hope it's for all hotel rooms, they'll also go to 5%.
नहीं है यार, वो उसमें भी वो 7,500 के ऊपर वाले होटल रूम. यार ये हमारे देश की बहुत बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है यार. ये अमीर है, अमीर को खून चूस लो उसका. मैं बोलता हूँ चूस लो, मगर सिस्टम को इजी करोगे तो
मैं बोलता हूँ
अमीर
देखो,
और काम करेगा.
नहीं आप see again agree or disagree on that. If we try to think, इंडिया में कितना अमीर है यार. योर टारगेट इज फॉर एन ओबरॉय होटल और ताज होटल, द टारगेट ऑडियंस शुड नॉट बी द इंडियन अमीर. वो तो है ही. Your target audience should be a rich guy from the US, UK, Western Europe, increasingly China, to come and visit your big hotels in Udaipur, Jodhpur, Delhi, Agra, etc. तो उधर अगर वो बंदा 50,000 के बदले अगर वो 40,000 रुपए दे सकता है क्योंकि आपने 18% के बदले 5% में डाल दिया है, 30,000 दे सकता है, whatever be the difference, he is more likely to come. Because you see, at the end of the day, he is deciding with his family, I want to go to XYZ exotic location. It could be Vietnam for him, it could be India for him, it could be Thailand for him, it could be China, it could be somewhere in the Middle East for him. So there are a bunch of factors. But why do you want to take 13% extra from the top hotels? Because again, it's not just the Indian rich who are going to these hotels. Ideally, your catchment area is the globe. So in some में lowest rate में लाना honestly should be seen as an investment in Indian tourism. Similarly, cement को 28 से 18 लाना, which I am very happy about, is finally happening, should be seen as an investment in Indian infrastructure and real estate. See, cement is one thing, unlike steel, which cannot be easily traded because the volume to value ratio is high. So cement is always per force mostly created in the country in which it is consumed. It's a unique kind of material because it takes a lot of volume and transportation therefore is expensive. तो सीमेंट तो 28 में रखने का कोई सेंस ही नहीं बनता था ना. वी वांटेड द रियल एस्टेट साइकिल टू गो अप. वी वांटेड द रियल एस्टेट साइकिल टू गो अप मोर इन क्वांटिटी, लेस इन प्राइस. आइडियली ज्यादा घर बने, दाम बाद में बढ़े, लेकिन ज्यादा लोगों को अच्छा घर मिले. सिमिलरली ऑफिसेज बने, फैक्ट्रीज बने, वेयर हाउसेज बने, होटल्स बने. तो इन सब में आप ज्यादा अभी ले लोगे, आपने इस साल तो ज्यादा ले लिया, आपने अगले साल की ग्रोथ थोड़ी कम कर दी ना. सो इट्स नॉट इवन अबाउट, I say, you please take more from the Indian elite eventually. I have no problem. But please try to understand, you ultimately, I don't know how many Indian Americans are there. I think Indian Americans are 3 million. I don't know, 1% of America, maybe. Slightly less than 1%. Maybe they are mixed, so the numbers vary. But let's say they are 3%. They're 3 million, 1%. And they have US average per capita income is $90,000. Let's say Indians are higher, it's probably much higher, but let's say it's $100,000. So 3 million into $100,000 is $300 billion, right? That's 10%, almost 8 to 9% of Indian GDP. Just just 3 million people, 100,000, 3 billion, and $300 billion. Now, if you can just get even 10% of that to just come and live in India for 5 7 years. Maybe they will not. They'll go back to the US at some point, and then there are people in UK and then Singapore and here and there. Imagine the kind of skill sets these people can bring. Imagine the kind of startups they can lead. What can we do to make it easier for them to come to India? Again, taxation is only one aspect. There are many more
मैं
aspects.
तेरे को एक आदमी का कमेंट जो लाइव में लिखा हुआ है ना वो पढ़ के उसका जवाब दे देता हूँ. I think we cannot dismiss such feelings. And I moved here from Europe in 2017. I end up spending more to maintain a decent quality of life and still might fall in a gutter when walking out of my Delhi street. See, these are real time issues that people feel.
I agree. No, no. I mean, see, honestly, our urban living is extremely, extremely unfortunate. Um, I can give you a meta explanation of why it is. It's not a rationalization, it's just an explanation. Given the universal adult franchise democracy we have, which I think is an extremely good thing. See, we have to again keep in mind India is the only large poor country which has developed from being a democracy from day one, and not a gradual democracy. It is universal adult franchise on day one, and honestly, that is the only way to do it in India. Given the heterogeneity of this country, if you had those weird income or education tests you tried in Jim Crow America and earlier in 19th century UK, wo chalta nahi idhar. In fact, some cantons of Switzerland gave women the right to vote as late as in the 1970s. So it's a very complicated situation where effectively urban elite is cross-subsidizing the rural areas and the urban poor. And that is part of the democratic compact. That is part of the social contract, political contract of living in India. But let us be very honest, the elite are also getting a chance at making a living in the world's fastest growing economy. I am
That is
I'm
fair,
fully
but
agreeing
you're
with.
making the assumption कि वो वहां से सीधा इधर आएगा उसको same job मिलेगा. I am not saying already people from
Yeah,
America are moving back to
yeah,
India in hoods. I know so many who have moved back to India in the
yeah,
last 10 years. They are making money. I know people who have started making investments in India while they live in America
yeah,
too,
yeah,
in the stock market and everything. That is there. But forget those who have gone. Let's talk about those who are there, and let's
yeah,
manage. Like on the real estate bit, you're right. Like I had shared this article just today that India's industrial and logistics real estate market is undergoing a significant transformation. This is from Economic Times. Driven by a renewed manufacturing push and strategic shift towards asset light models, manufacturing
yeah.
space leasing surged by 38% in each one
So
2000.
on the asset light model is an excellent point. This news that I've shared. See, India has come up with this REIT. REIT concept is there earlier in the US and Japan as well. It's a real estate investment trust, and we have done an infra equivalent of that called INVIT. So infrastructure investment trust. The idea is it's like halfway between debt and equity. So मान लो आपने office building बनाई. You are a real estate developer which made an office building. Then you sell it to a REIT in which you may have a share. The REIT collects the rents, and whoever are the shareholders, they just get the rent throughput. But you get the capital back, and you can invest in a new office building. Similarly, you build a highway. The highway can be sold to an INVIT. Your capital gets recycled. You don't have to hold that highway on your balance sheet. Let's say now you build a hotel. The physical part of the hotel can be put in a REIT, in a real estate investment trust, and just the asset light tarike se the management contract can be in the hotel listed company. So all of these things are happening, which are just new and different ways of financing growth. And absolutely a lot of good stuff is happening in Indian real estate as well. But doing some taxation reforms will formalize it and make it turbocharge and grow much faster. And we want the growth to happen on volume first. We don't want a real estate cycle just of price boom. वो हुआ था 2003 से 2007-8 में, and in the end it was good for people who bought, not good for people who had not bought, but not very sustainable beyond a point. Like in inflation adjusted terms, in India, real estate the last 10 years, take an average, is flat or probably down. I mean, some cities like Hyderabad, etc., have done better. Parts of Gujarat have done better, but broadly speaking, inflation adjusted real estate residential prices in India are flat or slightly down over the last 10 years. So cycle to up down hota hai, but the main thing is how can we make it easier for people to do these transactions with completely quickly, almost digitally if required. The transaction tax should be lower, the annual tax should be higher. Now, of course, I understand anybody who's already bought, now he does not want the annual tax to be higher, the property tax. I understand that. So let us do it gently, let us do it slowly. And once we do that, it becomes easier. But I fully agree with the guy who commented that in India, to lead a upper middle class quality life, which is safe, etc., people are effectively not to fall in some gadha, etc., which is why people have these residential societies. I mean, Gurgaon, those DLF luxury apartment complexes are like at very extreme, weird prices. You know, Mumbai, etc., very well. Why are people living in these places? Because they want to somehow cocoon themselves from a municipal setup, from an urban living where you are afraid of walking on a footpath. And that can only happen with municipal reforms. We don't know who the mayor is. The mayor is not a popular figure the way it is in New York, Toronto, London. It's more of a collective rule as opposed to one prominent mayor. A lot of the money comes top down. It's not, we don't directly pay to the municipality that much. And then there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of, again, the Indian state becoming more and more coherent. That process is on. So there are a lot of ethnic differences. People want to divide us on caste, language, religion, etc. तो वो चलता रहता है, and then there are contractors and subcontractors. So that is a very, very unfortunate thing, but I would say it is improving. Mumbai is getting very good infrastructure, but we are right now getting very, very 5 or 6 very great projects which are making overall transportation easier. But your average footpath, your average neighborhood is not getting better. So that kind of stuff, that's the next step to do. And I really hope that we are in a situation where we do not all have to live in gated communities, because right now it is totally rational and understandable for anybody to want to live in a gated community for their safety, their family's safety, etc. But the true good urban governance would be when that is not required. And we are not there yet right now.
So we have a special guest in the podcast. ये देखो, ये देखो, ये देखो, ये देखो, ये देखो, ये देखो हीरो, ये देखो.
ये कौन है?
वो आ जाता है बीच बीच में, आ जाता है.
What's his name?
हाँ, इसका नाम रेक्स है. आ जाता है ऐसे, देखता है क्या हो रहा है और फिर चले जाता है.
कितने बजे होते
But
हैं?
so before we take a few questions for wrapping up, GST reforms, I don't understand why this luxury tax, sin tax as they call it, is going to be there, but that's it. I think the government is just doing political management. They just can't do the political answer in a scenario where bhai hum ye kar denge, aise kar denge, waise kar denge. So it's going to remain,
I
it's a
think they're
political
partially they're
compulsion.
also politically, but also partially they're trying to not forego that much revenue, which I think is, see, I mean, I'm not commenting on cigarettes and stuff, although honestly, even for cigarettes and tobacco, having very high tax rates leads to more smuggling of cigarettes. So again, you can put whatever tax you want, the market incentives then kick in, right? We saw that with gold also, gold smuggling, etc.
We saw that with gold. ये तू बोल रहा है ऑनलाइन गेमिंग इंडस्ट्री का जो आज बिल पास हुआ है, पीपल डोंट वांट टू टॉक अबाउट इट. ऐसा कोई नहीं है कि मेरे को ऑनलाइन गेमिंग इंडस्ट्री ने पैसे दिए हैं. ऑल आई सेड वाज, मैंने एक हिस्टोरिकल फैक्ट बताया एज अ हम्बल स्टूडेंट ऑफ रिलीजन. this obsession with gay, jua is a Islamic obsession. People don't like to admit to it. I have read a few smritis. फिर लोग बोलते हैं महाभारत तो जुए की वजह से हुई. अबे महाभारत में भी एक ही चीज प्रूव होती है, जुआ इलीगल नहीं था. महाभारत में अगर कोई चीज प्रूव होती है तो जुआ इलीगल नहीं था, वो प्रूव होती है. बट लुक एट दिस. सो द रेवेन्यू इंपैक्ट इज देयर. व्हाई इज आवर कंट्री सो ऑब्सेस्ड टू बी इन अ कल्चर वेयर सब कुछ बैन कर दो, इसको बैन कर दो, उसको बैन कर दो. अभी महाराष्ट्र में हाईकोर्ट में जैन कम्युनिटी ने बोला पर्यूषण के टाइम पे मीट बैन कर दो. और भाई तुम लोग को बैन के अलावा और कुछ सूझता ही नहीं है क्या?
खाली उसकी बात नहीं ना, देखो एक इंडस्ट्री बहुत सालों से बन रही है. अब ये थोड़ा, अब आप सोचो, there are people who have venture capitalists may have invested some money, entrepreneurs who are running this. So everything has to be done in a context. I personally have no stake in this, in any
नहीं, और
investments,
ना
and
मुझे कोई पैसे मिलते हैं. मेरा तो एक फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लम है यार इससे कि why do we do these things? Like bans never work.
तो पहले
When will
वो
Indians realize?
गोवा में कसिनोज थे, उसका जो जीएसटी का बिल आया था, इट वाज मोर देन द ओवरऑल रेवेन्यू ऑफ द कसिनो, बिकॉज द वे दे अज्यूम्ड, आप क्या है कि एक इंसान ने खरीदा टोकन, कूपन्स खरीदते हैं ना कसिनो में, आप उसको, आपने खरीदा 100 रुपए का, लेकिन आप कुछ जीते कुछ हारे, तो आपने उसको 10 बार स्पेंड किया एक टेबल पे.
Yeah, and बोलना मेरे
तो
को.
उसने 1000 रुपए पे लगा दिया टैक्स, और आपने एक्चुअली 100 रुपए दिए थे कसिनो को. इसने
Have the
बोल दिया
liquor bans in
300 रुपए.
Gujarat and Bihar worked? No.
No, they've not.
They've never.
And
These things don't work. It
no,
never worked in the United States of America in the 1920s. They just don't work. Things go underground. They
it's
just
not
go
about
underground.
US or India, it's just human nature, yeah. Matlab, some things don't work. And also, completely different topic. And I, as you know, like you, I'm a supporter of the government and the party, but I'm uncomfortable. I'm not read at the details, and this is not slightly away from the podcast. This somebody will be removed as a minister, chief minister, or prime minister if he has been arrested for 30 days by any agency.
I have
Uh,
not read that bill.
yeah, I've also not read the bill, but just because he's arrested but he's not convicted, I think I disagree with that point. I mean, like, if ex government does not abuse it, tomorrow why government may abuse it? And I think थोड़ा सा हमें careful होना चाहिए. But again, the caveat is we have not read the draft, so but then we just
I will
having a chat.
comment on it once I've read the draft. So we should hold on that. But okay, last set of reforms overall. Like RBI, why doesn't it cut rates? Like what is the RBI waiting for? Grah Dasha?
Yeah, अभी वो is a separate
नहीं, वो
technical
तो मैं पूछूंगा
discussion.
तुझे क्योंकि तेरी दुखती रग है.
वो see, अभी क्या हुआ कि just again for your viewers, we took inflation targeting. We adopted it, I think 7 or 8 years ago. India has a 4% inflation target. Consumer Price Index year-on-year growth, CPI 4% target. Range is between 2 to 6%. And if for a couple of quarters you are outside of that range, then you have to, RBI governor should appear in front of the parliamentary committee or something and kind of explain, bhaiya kya hua. So fine, there is a 4% target. The US and Europe, etc., have a 2% target. They are more mature economies, where sort of growth भी कम है, inflation भी कम है. Fair enough. आपने इन्फ्लेशन टारगेटिंग को गिन ली. अब आपने ये नहीं सोचा कि फॉर अ गिवन इन्फ्लेशन एंड अ गिवन ग्रोथ, फॉरगेट अभी कितना है, कितना होना चाहिए इंटरेस्ट रेट. तो उसको टेक्निकली इकोनॉमिस्ट बोलते हैं रियल रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट, आर स्टार, या नॉमिनल रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट स्टार, इन द सेंस कि अगर 4% इन्फ्लेशन टारगेट है फॉर एवरेज इन्फ्लेशन व्हिच इज सपोज्ड टू बी 4%, and let's say average growth, let us say in our case it is 7.5%. I think 6.5 is definitely on the lower side, and there are technical reasons for that we can go into. But when your inflation is also lower than target, usme bhi the headline and core, there are nuances, and your growth is also lower than target, then your interest rate should be lower. So this is known as a real rates framework. The way that happens in Fed or the European Central Bank is the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee in these regions, all of these members, they say एक साल बाद उनके हिसाब से इन्फ्लेशन ग्रोथ और इंटरेस्ट रेट क्या होने वाला है. उसको हम बोलते हैं डॉट प्लॉट. इन colloquial business jargon we call it dot plot. We have basically copied inflation targeting, and we have not copied real rates framework. तो हुआ क्या in the last 7-8 years, and this was true even before COVID, Kushal, कि हमने इन्फ्लेशन कम करने के चक्कर में इंटरेस्ट रेट से बहुत बढ़ा दिए. वो इंटरेस्ट रेट से डायरेक्टली 1-to-1 इन्फ्लेशन कम हो भी रहा है, नहीं हो रहा है, कितना हो रहा है, थोड़ा सा हो रहा है, ग्रोथ ज्यादा रुक रहा है, वो वी हैव नो एनालिसिस ऑफ दैट. एंड व्हाट हैज हैपेंड इज, कोई बंदा आरबीआई जाता है, तो अब मानो आपने रेट काटा, दुनिया क्या बोलेगी, वेस्टर्न प्रेस क्या बोलेगी, ऑपोजिशन क्या बोलेगी, रेट काटा चमचा है, वो तो गवर्नमेंट का आदमी है, यही बोलेगी. रेट नहीं काटा, ही स्टैंडिंग अप फॉर द इंस्टीट्यूशनल ऑटोनॉमी ऑफ इंडिया सेंट्रल बैंक. So not everybody is going into doing an analytical analysis of where the real rate should be right now. वो सब तो दूर की बात है. Not that none of this is perfect by itself. These are only indicative frameworks. But partially, actually, because after demonetization, and that's also an uncomfortable topic for us to now analyze in retrospect. uh, I think RBI felt the need to be tighter than usual to show that it is quote unquote autonomous. वो दिखावे पूरा हाथी के दांत दिखाने के होते हैं. Then Shaktikanta Das started off dovish, then he became ultra hawkish. Sanjay Malhotra started, it's very early on right now. So I feel the government does not needs to understand that at 7% growth and 4% inflation, is 6% the right short-term rate nominal, or should it be 5%? Basically, risk-free adjusted real rate should be 1% or 2%, because 6 होगा तो -4 करके 2 है, 5 होगा तो -4 करके 1 है. I feel the real rate in India should be lower. There are many reasons for that. Our currency is appreciating in real terms, etc. And in any case, we can see the proof is in the pudding, right? The economy beyond the post-COVID boom is not growing very fast. Inflation headline is 1.7, 1.6. Core inflation 4 target के पास है, और उसमें भी X gold कर दो, because gold rose a lot in the last 1 year, 30% भागा, तो adjusted core inflation is like 3.7, 3.6%. So inflation is benign, around your target or below it. Growth is definitely lower compared to your long-term average, which is increasing by around 1 percentage point every decade on a per capita sense. By all numbers, our economy has gaps, in the sense फीमेल लेबर फोर्स पार्टिसिपेशन जो हमारा रेट्स बढ़ा, हमारे डेटा हमने ऑगमेंट किया, it's fine, but a lot of the labor force participation which has increased in the last 5 years in reportage is in casual labor, agricultural labor, or self-employed home labor. A lot of that is real job, I'm not at all dissing it, but beyond a point, this maybe government deserves credit for formalizing to an extent. EPFO registrations have gone up, etc. But the kind of growth that can happen in India, that is not happening in India. And right now, the Indian absorptive capacity, the infrastructure which this government has created after spending so much political capital, after not going berserk with redistribution before elections, अब आपने जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनाया है, एक्सप्रेसवेज बनाए हैं, जो मेट्रो बनाए हैं, उन पे आप सोचो कितने टाउनशिप्स बन सकते हैं, कितने फैक्ट्रीज बन सकते हैं. And the cost of capital for an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur, is extremely critical when margins are very thin. और आप किसको क्रॉस सब्सिडाइज कर रहे हो? यू आर क्रॉस सब्सिडाइजिंग दोज हु आर इन द 50s and 60s and are in upper middle class elite families. I always say, अगर आपको डर लगता है पॉलिटिकली पॉपुलिज्म पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से रेट्स काटने में, then give targeted incentives to senior citizens who are in poor or middle class families. Definitely do that, no doubt. आप उसको targeted तरीके में करो, but the cost of capital for the rest of the economy has to come down. Chinese 30Y is 2%. The Chinese government borrows for 30 years at a 2% annual rate. It's fallen below Western economies. How will you compete with China? Your 30Y is 7%. आप inflation adjusted कर दोगे तो भी gap है. So the cost of capital has to come down. If we have to help senior citizens, let us do it in a targeted manner. आप savings rate, postal rate, PPF rate 8% पे नहीं रख सकते हो. When your inflation is 2%, 3%, at most 4%, you cannot have these things. Of course it is popular with people, because अगर गवर्नमेंट आपको गारंटी दे रही है, आपको 8% मिल रहा है, लोग बोलते हैं क्यों दिमाग लगाना है, थोड़ा टैक्स लग जाएगा तो भी लग जाएगा. बहुत लोग वैसे भी अब टैक्स ब्रैकेट में नहीं आते हैं. So we have to understand that growth happens when people take risk. There are small taxation reforms that can further happen. Just to quickly add, इंडिया में डिविडेंड टैक्सेशन पहले डिविडेंड डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन टैक्स था, 10% था, तो कंपनी देती थी, आपके हाथ में फ्री था. अब जो जिसके हाथ में आता है वो अपने मार्जिनल टैक्स रेट में देता है. Now, in a situation where your dividend taxation is much higher than capital gains, basically disincentivizes companies from giving dividend taxes. And if you actually want to make your stock market more stable and let more people come in, the metaphorical widows to invest, the metaphorical grandmothers to invest, then you want the dividend to be higher so that the capital gains volatility is lower, that the stock becomes quasi bond. So बहुत सारे reforms हैं which can happen. My only point is we really should understand India is not the be all end all of the world economy, even though we are very important. If we are an easier place to live, do business in, pay taxes in, lower amounts, lower compliance, we can actually attract the world's talent, because this is going to be the world's fastest growing major economy for a long period of time. People will want to say that India मेरे CV में होना चाहिए. अगर आपने कोई इंडियन यूनिकॉर्न में काम नहीं किया तो what is the point of going back and doing an MBA even in the US? It will gradually happen. It's not mainstream right now, but it will happen. I remember before Xi Jinping, like working in China and to some extent Brazil, etc., was extremely hot. Like even American citizens who had no ethnic or ancestral connection to China wanted to do a 3 month or 6 month internship in China. And in India, that is much more sustainable. It's a democracy. The language of business is effectively English, or English, but effectively English. So there are a lot more compatibilities as well. So I think that this is a chance to go to the next level. We need to assume that tax buoyancy will be there. Most people are honest by and large. आप छोटी चीजों को overlook करो. Go after the real culprits who are big culprits. Make them an example of, and let there be ease of living for most people. And really, please, the process of registering a business, closing a business, starting a bank account, अलग GST license, अलग ये, अलग वो, अलग इन सबको वो, for big foreign investors they say one window approval, like omnibus approval. तो छोटे वाले के लिए भी वो कर दो ना यार. Like, let me just buy a company off the shelf of Amazon or Flipkart. You buy it, you pay 10,000 rupees in one go, 5,000 rupees in one go, and you say, I am a director, he's a director, bank account hai. If it is all clear, I want to close the business, it should be a 15-day process. We can actually learn from Estonia on this. Estonia has done a lot of good stuff. Singapore has done good stuff. So if you want, there are very good examples. Because the more people, अब मैं आपको लास्ट एग्जांपल बताता हूँ. बैंगलोर में अचानक से जीएसटी के वो जाने लग गए रिक्वायरमेंट्स टू पे अप टू द स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स. वाई? क्योंकि वो यूपीआई से पेमेंट्स ले रहे थे. अब वो बंदा बोल रहा है कि नहीं जी वो एग्जाम्प्ट में था, अब देयर इज नो वे टू प्रूव, आप उसको हैरेस करो. अब वो एक पर्टिकुलर लिमिट के नीचे है, सो जस्ट लेट इट बी. नाउ व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इज द स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स में बात फैल रही है कि यूपीआई से पैसा नहीं लेना है, कैश ही लो वापस. क्योंकि मैं यूपीआई से ले रहा हूँ, मेरे साल में 10-15-20 लाख रुपए आ रहे हैं, मेरे पास नोटिस आ रहा है कि आप इनकॉर्पोरेटेड नहीं हो, आपको ये टैक्स देना है. आई एम नॉट अगेन सेइंग दैट देयर आर सम स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स जो करोड़ों का रेवेन्यू करते होंगे और शायद सच में टैक्स नहीं देते होंगे. बट देन is the stick the only way, or you also want to have a carrot? You want to have a carrot ताकि वो बंदा उसको पूरा वाइट कर देना. आप उसका आप कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स हमने काम कर दिया, अगेन प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी डिड इट, बट मेक द प्रोसेस सो सीमलेस that he wants to incorporate it, and then using that incorporated entity he wants to get a further loan. So the point is, this process cannot be punishment. And if we use only the stick, eventually people will go back to cash in parallel economy. If you use stick along with the carrot, then it will work perfectly fine. So I think compliance is not just for a headline. It really will formalize the Indian economy much further to everybody's benefit.
My honest answer is a lot of what goes on is because we are a low trust society overall. We have trust issues in India, and that's why the people don't trust the government doesn't trust the people. And it is a fact.
Historical context, 100%.
A lot of lawmaking in India is in a classical low trust society, a nanny state, which is
Top
why
down.
all these stunts, and in a very jovial way, I just realized कि ड्रीम 11 जिसकी अभी बैंड बजने वाली है वो बीसीसीआई का स्पॉन्सर है और बीसीसीआई मां बनाती है. उसके पहले बाइजू स्पॉन्सर था, बाइजूस की भी लग गई, अभी ड्रीम 11 की लग गई. बेहतर तो तेरे को वीडियो दिखाऊंगा. इसने बीसीसीआई को स्पॉन्सर किया धड़ोम, उसके बाद इसने किया धड़ोम, जो बीसीसीआई को स्पॉन्सर
Again,
करता है उसकी लग जाती है.
on a very serious note, Kushal, I mean, there are people who are working in these companies. So my point is, okay, आपने एक बार ले लिया decision, but this should not become a habit where people are working in sectors which are getting various kinds of PE, VC funding. They become large enterprises, and then suddenly it is declared to be illegal. I don't know the details of the business. I don't know. I've not seen the order. वो skill versus
मैं
luck.
बिल पढ़ रहा हूँ, मैंने अभी तक पूरा पढ़ा नहीं है. I just fundamentally don't like this culture of bans. I don't like this culture of bans. I've never liked this culture of bans. And no matter what people say, I am not going to agree on this because there is enough data, scientific research of different cultures, not just Western cultures, which have
Yeah.
clearly shown that there is a Laffer curve on ban and restriction also.
Yeah. There's a Streisand effect, right, on everything. I mean, like a ban karte ho, ultimately wo below free speech maybe it does not work, and on these stuff also doesn't work.
It will
And
never
see,
work.
for example, there are all these betting websites in the US, right? On any particular thing, वो president बनेगा नहीं बनेगा, वो Bitcoin में ये होगा नहीं होगा,
Yes.
you people are betting. Now you can say that a lot of malified actors can put the money in, etc., etc. But it also becomes a prediction website where people say, somebody's putting the money where the mouth is, and in that sense, it's a useful public good. See, I am, for example, not very big on crypto, etc., for various reasons. But usme bhi everything there can be found a middle ground, right? I mean, I don't think it should be considered equivalent to gold, etc., any other asset. If there are because the problem with crypto is you can actually bypass state monitoring, and ultimately it can be used for all kind of wrong financings. So हर जगह रिस्क है. मैं नहीं बोलता कि I am no longer 100% libertarian. Maybe for 1 year or 3 months in college I was, or something like that. Some things have to be banned. Okay, fine, I understand hard drugs has to be banned, but like something like a betting website or an online games website जो इतने सालों से चल रहा है, is it necessarily the best thing? Maybe not. It's a broader socio-political decision, but I am very uncomfortable with this general tendency.
Very.
uh, so I'm not at all saying कि ये particularly decision खराब है. Details मैंने भी नहीं पढ़ा अभी तक, आजकल में ये आया है. But इसको बैन करने से कोई क्या सॉल्व होता है मुझे पता नहीं. I really think, and the biggest problem, of course, the most biggest manifestation of that is in free speech. The free speech,
Yeah.
maybe I'm all for having some sedition provisions, and there are a lot of nuances, Brandenburg, etc. Sedition where there are clear standards, or of something like an Official Secrets Act, etc., where you're contractually bound. But in most cases, it does not work. That's the thing. See, the point is, we are not even a Chinese totalitarian state. आप बैन भी करते हो, वो बैन का कोई वैल्यू भी नहीं होता, उस पर ज्यादा फोकस चला जाता है. एंड देन आप ना इधर के रहते हो ना उधर के रहते हो. You don't have the full freedom also, you don't have the competence of a hardcore totalitarian state also. So most bans don't work, and I'm very, what will happen is this betting will go underground, these online, remember the bad cricket days of that cricketer being approached, that cricketer being paid off, Hansi Krone and all that.
That's all we want to live in. That's all we want to live in. People
Yeah.
dying of drinking spurious liquor,
हाँ.
people dying of all the things that when you push them
Like
underground.
Bihar में, it has been a fiscal and a health tragedy. See, Gujarat mein also it's not great, but Gujarat mein 60 years mein an equilibrium was reached where people knew how to go to this some border areas,
दमन
and
एंड दीव बाजू में
exactly.
दमन एंड दीव जाते हैं वो लोग.
तो वो सिस्टम बैठ गया था. बट बिहार में this huge deaths, and because alcohol is one of the few things which was not under GST and fully under state revenue, when Bihar was getting a special package, and I support Bihar getting a special package, उस समय to let go of a fiscal revenue. See, there are many ways. What many countries did was they tried to push towards lower alcohol content. They tried to do many more awareness campaigns, because India में क्या होता है, generally Indian consumption, not to dwell too much on this, alcohol consumption content is high, which genuinely, I mean, I agree with the point of view of people like Sridhar Vembu also, that he lives in a village, he sees that being correlated to domestic violence and all of that, and I'm not underplaying all of those aspects. I'm just trying to understand, is it on the whole beneficial? I'm not convinced.
No, it
I
is not. This is the same knee jerkism. I mean, I don't know why. This is not a disrespect to Sridhar Bambu. What, he's right on everything or what?
no, not
No, he can be
disrespect नहीं कर
wrong.
रहा हूँ. नहीं मैं disrespect नहीं कर रहा हूँ. मैं बोल रहा हूँ, it is a reality in Indian villages. There is still a lot of domestic violence, but I'm not sure alcohol is the cause. कि अगर alcohol नहीं होता तो शायद वो नहीं मारता. It's a larger problem of women not being independent educationally, financially, and the guy may be beating even without alcohol. So I'm not sure alcohol is the cause. It may often be the correlation, and therefore I disagree. I actually agree with you. I'm just saying I understand people who wanted to ban it, but I don't think it works. That's the point. It does not work.
यार
And in
ड्रीम
Bihar, for
इलेवन तब नहीं था ना, अंबेडकर के टाइम पे अंबेडकर ने क्या बोला था? क्या क्या था वो, व्हाट इज अ विलेज? वो
a village is
अंबेडकर
when
ये
you had
बोलना
spoken
चाहिए
about.
ना अंबेडकर के कोट को, सीधा रीड करो ना। मेरे को तो समझ में नहीं आता है कि क्या मतलब what is a village but a sink of localism, a den of ignorance, narrow-mindedness and communalism. He said this during the Constituent Assembly debate, which led to the evolution of the Article 40 of the Constitution. So लोग बातें करते हैं बड़ी बड़ी, ये अंबेडकर ने तब बोला था, तभी ड्रीम इलेवन था, तभी अभी तभी था, तभी तभी ये सब चीजें अंडरग्राउंड होती थी, तब भी होती थी। भाई बियॉन्ड अ पॉइंट आपको इनको रेगुलेट करना चाहिए। मैं बोलता हूँ इनको एक्स्ट्रा टैक्स लगाओ, भयंकर टैक्स लगाओ, टैक्स लगा लगा के इनकी करो, मगर यू कैन नॉट मेक इट इलीगल। यू शुड नॉट मेक इट इलीगल, क्योंकि जब
illegal
ये
करके underground हो
अंडरग्राउंड
जाता है.
जाते हैं तो और पैसे डूबते हैं लोगों के।
No, I agree. I mean, it is unfortunate, but let us see. I mean, what happens. But yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, but
That
ठीक
part.
है, चलो I'll summarize the questions together and I'll mix it all in. मतलब a lot of them um, are obviously just like, this is like tax relief was delayed due to Babu pushback. Will the PM please explain now and sneak in fine कि मतलब बाबू से कैसे लड़े? Because you remember the honorable, you and I only had discussed that on this very podcast कि यार हमारा फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर बोल रही है कि यार मेरे को तो मेरे डिपार्टमेंट के लोगों से ही झगड़ झगड़ के मैं थक गई। यार कमाल है, मिनिस्टर बोल रहा है मैं उनसे ही झगड़ के थक गई।
No, I think. See, I think what happened was because that fiscal glide path was announced. Then वो क्या हो गया ना, वो एक लकीर का फकीर टाइप सिचुएशन बन गया कि आपने को इस साल 6%, इस साल 5%, इस साल 4% करना ही करना है. So luckily that is anyways expiring in FY26, that stated fiscal glide path. So I think there is more wiggle room. More importantly, again, the reason you have fiscal consolidation is you can use that buffer in a relatively tough situation. I'm not again saying it's a crisis. The situation may be very different in 2 weeks, but this is a tough situation. So if you do not open that fiscal spigot in this tough time, then when will you open the fiscal spigot? So I think the context is different now. I think now the political cover to increase the fiscal spend or the stimulus is much stronger than even 6 months ago.
Yeah, so somebody had asked, should we not rationalize taxes like road tax and GST? I think those things are going to be rationalized in the long run. I think this committee that the Prime Minister is heading, they are going to take into
नहीं, वो
consideration
committee में
all
सब
these matters.
committee में taxes पे नहीं हो. To be fair, the HLC committee is not so much on the taxes.
मगर
It
इनकम
is
टैक्स
more
बिल भी आ रहा है, तो अभी देखते हैं,
separate.
वो
हाँ,
बिल मैंने पढ़ा नहीं है।
वो separate आ रहा है. This committee is more on the regulatory side for non-financial, so non-RBI related, ease of doing business, ease of living.
ये था क्या, will LRS ever increase? It's not seen an increase since 1999. Until the rupee is not fully convertible, how can India ever
LRS,
sustainably?
Amit, will increase, but will have to wait a few more years. See, I mean, going to one of my favorite topics, the dollar cycle is the turning, the going down of the dollar cycle in a cyclical manner, not a structural manner, got delayed by a few years. You can say COVID, Ukraine, whatever realities that got delayed. I think it peaked out early this year. So as the rupee starts strengthening, which I do expect, including in nominal terms, the next few years, I'm sure it may be increased in a few years. I have been a proponent of capital account convertibility, freer capital account, but I recognize it has to be done in a sequenced manner. And first, you have to liberalize more the inflows, and the last thing to liberalize is the outflows. See, let us see this point when Trump has become hostile, and I am always one who wants to openly rethink his own positions. Uh, I was telling Kushal, I was a libertarian on trade. Obviously, I've had a rethink in the last 5 to 10 years. Even on capital account, see, अगर आज आपने capital account पूरा खोल दिया होता in 2025 without the dollar cycle having turned. So I have wrote an article in Mint, start opening it by 2025, but then there were certain assumptions which got delayed. Nonetheless, अगर आपने पूरा खोल दिया होता तो आज कितने सारे लोग आपके वो यूएस बिग टेक रैली में पैसा डाल देते, नैस्डैक में डाल दो जी, नैस्डैक में डाल दो जी. And then when your banking sector was going through a painful recalibration. Balance sheets were being cleaned. Your equity markets, the domestic flows, they became the means of funding entrepreneurship in India. IPOs, SME board, FPOs, QIP, promoter sales. So I am all for an open capital account, but it is a process. It will happen. I think the next few years of rupee strength, unlike the last 10, 12 years, should make it a more of a reality. But I think in retrospect, the caution of Indian policymakers, by and large, but उसमें भी बहुत red tape है RBI का on some of the foreign transfer, by and large actually has been proven correct. And my early enthusiasm for a much more capital account, given the context, was perhaps a bit too strong. So I am also recalibrating my position as we go along. So I want it to happen, Amit, but kuch saal aur.
The same person has also asked, is housing not broken in India? It is impossible to buy a home in any metro city in India. How will the government tackle this
See,
issue?
a large part in Mumbai, of
Real
course, is a
estate reforms.
yeah, Mumbai is a different animal altogether. Was the price of land itself is very high, but
भाई एफएसआई रिफॉर्म नहीं कर रहे हम लोग. एफएसआई रिफॉर्म करो ना तो भी रेट
FSI
करेक्शन आएगी.
reform, FSI or FAR reforms are very much true. But see, beyond a point, FSI भी अब कुशल अब हो गया है. आप कर दो FSI 2 से 3, 3 से 5. बट आपकी स्ट्रीट्स में अभी जगह ही नहीं है घुसने के लिए गाड़ी वाड़ी में. I mean, look at the traffic in any average Indian large city. So FSI is actually more doable once you have more public transport, especially underground metro, tunnels, etc. But a large part of the real estate cost is actually, Amit, is actually taxes. This levy, that levy, municipal, this and that. The only solution to real estate expense is to build much more infra. अब जैसे आप देखो, if you look at a map of NCR, to go from Noida to Gurgaon and having a bridge on the Yamuna, I think Man M से नाम एक bridge का M से Manjewali. The Manjewali bridge is being built for 5-7 years. And again, the money is there. The union government, state governments, UP and Haryana, all same party. But वो local level पे अटकी हुई है बात. But once you can go from Noida to Gurgaon via Faridabad and not having to go through South Central Delhi, a large expanse, for example, opens up for real estate at cheaper rates. But it is obviously happening. It just got delayed a bit. Bullet train aa raha hai. So I think real estate ka real answer, besides what we've already discussed in terms of some taxation, is just to build much more infra. People forget that India के लिए सही model is not China or America. It is actually countries like South Korea, Belgium, Netherlands, which have a similar population density of 300, 400, 500 people per square kilometer. And you look at these countries, the amount of infrastructure they've built in the last 20, 30 years in Korea and last 50, 60 years in Belgium and Netherlands is insane. So the idea that India में infrastructure will not lead to payback is wrong. It is true that हम highway बनाते हैं तो हम वो road tax के साथ हमने वो भी लगा दिया toll. तो वो टोल क्या, और टोल के चक्कर में लोग तुरंत उसको फुल यूज नहीं करते. बट इंडिया में हाईवेज, एक्सप्रेसवेज, रेलवेज, मेट्रो, टनल्स, और उसके बाद एफएसआई, और उसके साथ एफएसआई, व्हाट कुशल इज सेइंग इज द राइट वे टू गो अलोंग विद सम टैक्स रिफॉर्म्स. बिकॉज अगर कैचमेंट एरिया भर जाएगा उस सिटी का, then your real estate costs will automatically start going down.
Yeah, पता नहीं किसी ने एक क्वेश्चन पूछा. I तो don't think that is needed, and that's the only last question I want to take कि क्या बाबू लोगों की एज 40 साल के ऊपर रिक्वायरमेंट कर दी तो क्या ये सुधरेगा, उनको रियल लाइफ एक्सपीरियंस होगा?
नहीं, see, again to I have my own biases, but in defense of the government tried very hard to do lateral entry in our top bureaucracy. 12, 13 people were also recruited a few years ago. But it is just a reality of politics. Rahul Gandhi brought up that you are hiring lateral entry people, and our quota is not applicable to lateral entry. फिर वो बात उधर रह गई. So I think then the government came on the defensive. Now the lateral entry was always supposed to be a specialized kind of 5-year role, something where they are bringing a particular domain knowledge. Now the reality is, again, we live in a very large, complex, heterogeneous polity. आप चाहो तो उसमें गुस्सा निकाल लो, आप गवर्नमेंट को गाली दे लो, उससे कोई फायदा नहीं है, because there is a political reality. So then we'll go to our old debate and old discussions. So I don't want to go into that right now. So given that political reality, the government took a step back. Now the government took a step back, so वो lateral entry का game खत्म हो गया. And then to be again, the government, for example, hired a lot of outside people for RBI and SEBI, just to give an example. And for various reasons that did not work out well. Some people had a book ready from economic advisor position the moment they left. SEBI में कोई controversies हो गई, RBI में we know what happened to Raghu Ramrajan. People, some people just take India to be a posting ground. Otherwise, they go back to America and American academia.
रघुराम राजन तो बोलते हैं ना, हमको मैन्युफैक्चरिंग करनी ही नहीं चाहिए, सिर्फ सर्विसेज करनी चाहिए.
वो तो I mean, another level of person. But what I'm saying is, the government then came to the realization that this quote unquote private sector expert, outside academic expert, they went back to the default कि यार IAS का इंसान है तो कम से कम he understands the system. वो इंडिया में है, for better or worse, even after this role and after this job. So I think it's a difficult situation, and I'll again say, just unloading on the babus beyond a point really does not move the needle. The broader issue is, what are the incentives of them, because many of them are very smart individually, and if you're in a babu's position, you don't want to put anything on a file which may be used against you 10 years later. I mean, Arun Shori, who today we may disagree with on this or that issue, that gentleman privatized some government hotels in Delhi under the Vajpayee government.
ओ या वो, अरे बाप रे,
वो
क्या तमाशा हुआ था उसमें.
10-12 साल बाद उसको आउटलुक मैगजीन ने निकाला. उसके नीचे जो सेक्रेटरी था वो ब्यूरोक्रेट, he was pulled over the
सेंटोर होटल के ऊपर, याद है तेरे को जो बवाल हुआ था सेंटोर होटल के ऊपर. Oh my God.
My point is, you see, from the Babu's point of view, they would rather not put anything on writing and have it explode on their head. So then the point is, the top political leadership कितने लोगों को कवर देगी. तो जो चीज प्रायोरिटी में आती है उस पे कवर मिलता है, बाकी वो, see, ultimately who got Air India privatized? Amit Shah. Because he was a political heavyweight, he is number 2 to Prime Minister Modi. Now who will ultimately get GST through? Amit Shah. Now Amit Shah of course has a different personality than Arun Jaitley. Of course Amit Shah ji की personality अलग है, Arun Jaitley जी की personality अलग थी. लेकिन when really complicated political decisions come up, it requires a political push. But again, by definition, political power is rare, and therefore what you can prioritize is not everything. So I think the system is what it is, and I am very, very happy that the Prime Minister, just to conclude, Kushal, since you started off with the Independence Day speech, he spoke about tech autonomy. He spoke about having our own software and internet companies over time. He spoke about having our own jet engine. He spoke about the fact that GST ka Diwali bonanza milega, so effectively a fiscal stimulus. Of course, he cannot speak on monetary policy. It happens through RBI. And he said that, hum Atmanirbhar honge. But again, that Atmanirbharta, I want to say, is not conventional or classical protectionism. India wants a US trade deal. India wants a EU trade deal. India already got a UK trade deal. India has Australia trade deal. Japan, South Korea, ASEAN ke saath deals already in place hai. We got one with the Gulf, particularly UAE. And except China, and even now we are opening again to China also to some extent because of what's happening geopolitically. But except China, we were and we are looking to do all kinds of trade deals with everybody. There are some core areas in agriculture, in parts of technology, where of course we are very sensitive, either because of political reasons or national security reasons. But the idea that India is closed is completely false. I think 40-45% of India's GDP is trade, 45%. Much higher than earlier. Of course, China and US are larger economies. Their percentage numbers are lower. I think China is 35, US is 25. If you add goods and services, imports and exports, and divided by GDP, India is 45%.
India has reduced its taxes.
Taxes have reduced from Indira Gandhi, sure, but even earlier. And then
I believe corporate tax rate of India for the next 20 years should not be more than 15%, in my view. Corporate tax rate, not individual tax rate.
समझ गया, already Modi ji ने second term में कम किया था. And also if you look at it, across sectors where even we have some industrial trade policy, all foreign players are allowed to build here. Like our top two car manufacturers are Japanese and Korean. So India is completely open for business. It wants certain value add to happen domestically in different sectors. And but Atmanirbharta as a general rule, you can use a political slogan like Swadeshi or self-reliance. It does not mean autarky. It means autonomy. It does not mean India is closed for business. But there are some things which we cannot be completely laissez-faire about. That has become very clear.
So no Milton Friedman, zero taxes.
We cannot go full Friedman. The way I like to conclude is saying we need Frederick Hayek, or which is another version of Milton Friedman. You also need Frederick List. Frederick List was the German American economist of the 19th century who had the American system or the national system, who was like Alexander Hamilton and Abraham Lincoln. People forget throughout 19th century America had very high tariffs because then the dominant manufacturer, like today it's America or now China, it was then UK. And UK controlled Indian trade, but it of course could not control American trade. America had become independent in 1776. So America actually used tariffs to industrialize. There is still debate about that, but they used tariffs to industrialize. Now we are not saying we are in that age today. Container shipping is much cheaper. Technology is there. We can talk to each other across continents like we are right now. But there are some lessons to be learned, and India is simply saying we have to be Atmanirbhar at this scale without being closed for business. And I think that is extremely correct for the Prime Minister to emphasize.
Yeah, I'll just leave people with this hilarious bit from Raghav Chadda. In Parliament today, I urge that every Indian be given free subscription of advanced AI tools like Chat GPT, Gemini, Claude and others. मैं बोला यार मतलब इस देश का कुछ नहीं हो सकता. इस देश का कुछ नहीं हो सकता जिसमें आदमी पार्लियामेंट में आके बोल रहा है चैट जीपीटी फ्री दे दो सब्सक्रिप्शन. फिर कल को आके ना कोई दूसरा बोलेगा यार नेटफ्लिक्स की भी फ्री दे दो सब्सक्रिप्शन.
उसके बाद क्या आएगा समझ ले.
हाँ. हमारा कुछ नहीं हो सकता. कुछ नहीं हो सकता हमारा. हमारे नेता पार्लियामेंट में आके ये डिमांड करते हैं. पार्लियामेंट में आके
हंसो हंसो लेकिन सब होगा, सब होगा. Nobody can stop this country from becoming the world's largest GDP in the middle of the century.
India rises despite its politicians.
But whatever it is, without politicians, there is no India also. So it is what it is.
It is what it is. And on that very great note, Harsh, as always, being the eternal optimist, I being the realist, and we will wrap it up. Bhai, thank you very much as always coming on the pod. Let's see how things pan out in the next 1 year. We will monitor this very closely, and then we'll keep on talking about this from time to time. Thank you very much as always.
Okay, Kushal.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys later on. Go follow Harsh on X and buy his book. Whenever it comes out. हर्ष की बुक कब आएगी वो कुछ मालूम नहीं होता. वो हर्ष महा आलसी इंसान है. उसकी बुक कभी आएगी. मेरी तीसरी बुक आ जाएगी शायद. उसके बाद हर्ष की बुक आ जाएगी. एंड
अभी तो तेरी दूसरी आ रही है ना.
हाँ आएगी अभी. मैं भाई मेरे 35,000 वर्ड्स हो गए. मेरे को अभी सिर्फ 15-17,000 वर्ड्स ही लिखना है.
तो पूरी भड़ास निकाल दिया पूरी स्पीच पे.
हाँ पूरी. मैं 1 साल के लिए फिर कनाडा रह लूंगा. सब लोग मुझे ढूंढते रहेंगे इंडिया में. 1 साल के लिए
कनाडा. तेरे कनाडा में बहुत फैंस भी हैं और कोट अनकोट फैंस भी हैं.
हाँ वैसे मेरे सारे हैं. मेरे पंखे भी हैं और मुझे पंखे में लटका देने वाले इच्छा रखने वाले भी लोग हैं. दोनों हैं.
ऐसा obviously not कोई नहीं कर पाएगा. But yes.
So guys, as always, keep supporting the Cārvāka podcast. If you want to support us monetarily, either by sending one-time donations or through the membership, all the details are in the description of the podcast. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, keep paying taxes and have a great time. Bye.